Welcome to North Country Commerce, a business and community service of the Plattsburgh North Country Chamber of Commerce. I'm Gary Douglas, Executive Director of the Chamber, and each week we try to examine different topics, things that are happening in the business community, things that may be being planned or thought of for the future, or services that are available to businesses out there. In this episode, we're going to look at a potentially very exciting concept that has come partially as a result of the closure of Plattsburgh Air Force Base and some of the opportunities that the reuse of those facilities may offer all of us here in the North Country. It's a very exciting concept, and perhaps what's most exciting about it for us at the Chamber is that it's really kind of a homegrown concept in the way that we have some folks right here in the community that have brought this concept to us and are willing and able and capable of working on it. We don't have some outsiders coming up here from Virginia or someplace selling us this concept and saying we want to come in here and do this for you. It's happening right here and coming right from local folks. That's exciting from the fact that it once again reflects really the tremendous wealth of talent and ability that we have here in the North Country that too often we take for granted or don't really look around and realize it is right here in our own backyard. But it also, I think, may make this concept even more real. It's one thing to have some outside consultant come in and charge a lot of money and give you a lot of pretty pictures and stuff and then go back home. But when you got local folks working on a project and saying we want to make this work, it may actually have a whole lot more substance to it because they're going to stay here and keep working on it. Joining me to talk about this concept today is Mark Berry, President and CEO of the Plattsburgh Air Base Redevelopment Corporation. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
And Bruce Stedman of U.S. Facilities Management here in Plattsburgh. And welcome, Bruce.
Thank you.
Bruce, Eco-Industrial Park, that's what we're talking about. Tell us what that means and what the genesis of this concept is.
Okay. Well, actually, at its simplest, an eco-industrial park is an industrial park devoted to sustainable development, to using and reusing waste materials as raw materials, where one company's waste becomes the raw material for his neighbor's waste. At the same time, there's a regional implication too, that the resources of the region, and in this area we consider the region from Montreal to Lake Placid to the Champlain Valley, that the region's resources are used wisely and effectively to provide the biggest return to the region, both economically but also environmentally.
Now, where did this concept come from? It's been being talked about out there, but there isn't a place where it's actually been carried out fully yet, though, is it?
Well, there are a couple eco-industrial parks in Europe that have been successful for many years. They haven't been studied much in this country yet, mostly because there hasn't been an economic or perceived environmental need until recently. I became aware of the concept at a seminar in Washington a few months ago, and at a presentation by some folks at Cornell. I recruited the people at Cornell to be a part of our team, and since then we've worked up a proposal, gone to the US EPA for some funding to do a baseline study, and we believe that it's the right project at the right time, and we've talked with Mark and the park board who have endorsed it, and there are a number of things that are just perfect for it to happen now.
Like what? Describe why do this concept here now?
Okay, let me start out and let's look at the base for just a minute. The proposed use of the base as an industrial aviation park is based on the fact that there are some of these parks existing around the world and they're successful. Now, the key components of these parks are the fact that they have air, industrial, intermodal, meaning rail and highway access and facilities. Now, in some of these parks, several hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent to put these kinds of infrastructure items together. But here, we don't need to do that because we've already got the air and the industrial buildings. We've already got the rail, magnificent rail turnaround facilities here. We've got access to the highways, access to Lake Champlain. We're an hour from Montreal, and all those geographical and locational assets that are here, the beauty of the mountains and the lake, etc. So from an infrastructure and an environmental standpoint, we have everything in place here that they have at these successful parks. Now, the way these parks are successful is that they drive the occupants' costs down by consolidating warehousing, locating next to these transportation ways, and providing good workforce opportunities. So the costs for the companies that locate there go down. Now, one of the things that we can do with the eco-industrial park idea is take that and expand upon it and drive the people that occupy here, their costs even down further. And I'd like to talk about that for a couple minutes.
Yeah, if you could. Now, I know a term that we hear a lot in connection with this that most viewers wouldn't be familiar with is ISO 14000. Could you explain maybe to folks just very briefly kind of what that is, why it's going to be more important in the future, and how this park could potentially position us to be part of that movement?
Sure, that's a key point. Several years ago, when the TQM movement, Total Quality Management movement, started in this country and in Europe, the International Standards Organization, or ISO, developed a set of standards called ISO 9000. ISO 9000 is based on taking those TQM standards and applying a kind of an international certification process, so that one company could be comforted and knowledgeable that his customer or his supplier had the same set of quality standards. And if you can prove or certify to that, then you get this registration called ISO 9000. Now, ISO 14000 is taking those TQM principles and applying them to environmental management, with the idea that companies will continuously improve in their environmental performance and thereby be better customers and suppliers and people to do business with. Now, it appears that the ISO 14000 set of standards are creating the same kind of interest and endorsement that the ISO 9000 standards did. So companies in Europe are now, and in North America, are now requesting and requiring that their customers and suppliers be certified to ISO 14000. Financing institutions, banks, developers, investors, insurance companies are all requiring that certain standards be met before they'll do business with other parties. And these ISO 14000 standards certify to the world that a company's environmental management programs are state-of-the-art, leading edge, and successful.
Mm-hmm. There's also a certain sales cachet to all this too, isn't there? I mean, companies having that image, which also has some substance behind it, but also being able to enjoy that image of their products being green. We all see that in stores and on products more and more. But then adding to that, not just doing that in some industrial park in Philadelphia or something, but that it's coming out of the Adirondacks and the Champlain Valley. There's some quality to that.
Absolutely. There's really two components. When we talked about how these industrial aviation parks around the world work and drive costs down, we're going to do two things. We're going to drive costs down, but also improve revenues, like you just mentioned. On the cost side, when companies come into the park, we'll ask them to voluntarily conform to the set of ISO 14000 standards that will apply to the eco-industrial park. By doing so, we'll be able to show them how to reduce costs, how to eliminate waste in their raw materials process, how to improve their plant engineering process, how to do other things to drive their costs down, avoid some of the permitting requirements that they might normally have to address. But by being in the park under this umbrella permitting program already, they'll be compliant with state and federal laws, but not need to go through some of the bureaucratic hoop jumping, if you will. Now, on the revenue side, they'll be able to tell their customers and suppliers that they're a green company, that they're an environmentally sensitive company. They'll be located in an eco-industrial park in the Adirondacks. What a better place on earth than that to show environmental sensitivity. They'll be complying with certain rules and voluntarily set requirements that they'll want to do, and they'll be able to sell that to their customers. That's a little bit of sizzle. So it'll improve their revenues on one side, lower their costs on the other side, and so the bottom line, that their profits are improved.
So, Mark, what do you see this concept? What role do you see it playing? How big or important a role? Why is Park buying into this?
We're very excited at Park about the concept for a number of reasons. Number one, this is good for both the environment and the economy. And number two, there is a certain economic development marketing advantage that will accrue to Park as a result of achieving the eco-industrial park here at Plattsburgh. And let me see if I can illustrate. Right now, for example, the bulk of our new manufacturing jobs come from Canada. In fact, something like 90% come from Canada. Over half of the manufacturing jobs that we have now come from Canada. And some people have even suggested that we're too reliant on Canada. But the fact remains they're close to home. We stand a better chance than most people of attracting Canadian manufacturers. But if we were to go to New Jersey or Pennsylvania or New York City and ask a manufacturer to come up north, we are unable to demonstrate to them that there's a large population up here and therefore they can sell their products, nor can we demonstrate to them that they might find a lot of their raw materials for production up here. So there has to be another reason for them to come up to the North Country. And we believe the Eco-Industrial Park offers them that reason. We believe it offers them an environmentally clean and green location in the shadow of the Adirondack Mountains, right next door to the shorelines of Lake Champlain. We believe the Eco-Industrial Park will be, for them, a reduction in cost. So, for example, if you are a large trucking center in New Jersey and you want to open up a terminal up here, one of your waste product is going to be waste oil. You're going to have tremendous amounts of waste oil. Well, maybe right next to them in the Plattsburgh Eco-Industrial Park would be a person who recycles waste oil. This means a reduction in cost for the trucking company, and it means raw material for the fellow who is recycling waste oil. Mm-hmm. There might be a baby crib manufacturer, and you know from our discussions that some of these are true stories, mm-hmm. They're not just fictional. A baby crib manufacturer whose waste product is wood chips. Well, we're already at the air base checking into the use of wood chips as a technology to heat our buildings. So these are classic examples how one company's waste product becomes the raw material for another company. Now this is the proverbial hook upon which we can hang our hat when we go south of the border and try to market the North Country and Plattsburgh Air Base in particular to companies on the eastern seaboard anywhere in the United States. In addition, of course, the establishment of an eco-industrial park in Plattsburgh would be the first operational park in all of the United States. It would place us on the map. It would put us in a leadership position in this regard. And I can see nothing but positive environmental and economic things happening as a result of this. And I think not just Park, but the Chamber and the community owe Bruce a debt of gratitude for bringing this to our attention. It's a very exciting concept, and Park is solidly behind it.
Mm-hmm. One of the questions that came up at Park and was dealt with, and I'm sure other folks out there will have, saying that we're going to pursue this process at the base doesn't mean that this is the only avenue for marketing the base, or will become exclusive.
Yeah, that's very important, because one of the things that the Bruce's study that he would be conducting in conjunction with Cornell is a baseline study which would naturally include the manufacturers that we have here already. So, for example, if Georgia Pacific or Wyeth Ayers had a particular waste product, we would want to tie that in and attract companies to the area that could help them reduce their cost of reuse and recycle and reutilization. At the same time, just because we have a company that may not have found best quarters on the base, but yet fits the eco-industrial park concept, does not necessarily mean we're going to abandon them. We would want to situate them anywhere in the North Country where it makes sense, both common sense and dollars and cents, for them to locate. So this concept can actually grow, I think, from beyond the air base throughout the North Country, and that's one of the beauties of the concept, that it will work anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Talk about that, Bruce. I know we're getting Bruce together with our Quality Assurance Council here at the Chamber and other groups within the Chamber that represent the industrial sector employers in particular that are here now. How might some of the companies here, as this concept develops on the base, how might they network and benefit from it as well?
Good question. In fact, let me give a little background to follow up on something Mark just said. While there aren't any operating eco-industrial parks in this country, it's not because there isn't high interest. In fact, one of the President's key initiatives on the environmental agenda was to establish the President's Council on Sustainable Development. And there has been a tremendous amount of effort on the federal level to fund and research eco-industrial parks. In fact, there are 4 primary test sites across the country and 8 additional ones that have been funded by the federal government. All of these are in some phase of the study process, haven't gotten to implementation. And one of the beautiful things about the project for the North Country is that we're right at the head of the line for a number of reasons. One, we've got these magnificent facilities already in place. It's a contiguous piece of property. We can use as little or as much as Mark and the park folks decide we can and should use. We don't have to build. We don't have to clean up. areas like they do in other parts of the country, these other 12 sites. So we already have the facilities in place. In fact, we're going to be making a presentation next month at the President's Council of Sustainable Development conference in Cape Charles, Virginia. At that meeting, we're going to establish ourselves as the primary spot in the country because we've already got the facilities. We've already been through the community planning and management process that Park has been through. Park's board, and with Mark on board, is aggressive and assertive and ready to make some things happen. So that puts us miles ahead of many of, in fact, all of these other sites. So for once, the North Country is first and poised to be the leader. It's in perfect alignment with the governor's policies on marrying economic and environmental goals, and then making New York State the leader both in terms of the environment and the economy. So for all of those reasons, the window is open for us here like it's never been before. Now, what does that mean locally? It means there's going to be tremendous regional, statewide, and national attention, and hopefully international attention focused here in the North Country. That'll be a big benefit to business, no matter what business you're in. Specifically, the big companies that are located here have access already to the President's Council on Sustainable Development. So we're certain that they're going to be interested simply because their leaders are already involved in the process on a national level.
Georgia Pacific and some other companies that I've heard you mentioned are already
That's right.
Very, very into this process.
Georgia Pacific's CEO is a member of the President's Council on Sustainable Development. So these things are already in place and mean big things for the North Country potentially. Now what that'll do is bring in good-paying, sustainable jobs. It'll provide students for the universities. We're working on ways to develop curriculum enhancements at both SUNY Plattsburgh and Clinton Community College to introduce sustainable development and industrial ecology. We're looking for ways to link existing resources in the community, such as the Medical Center, Minor Institute, SUNY Plattsburgh, certain businesses, to provide ways for them to work together more economically and in a synergistic manner, so things dovetail and expand right along with what's happening at the Eco-Industrial Park. So
I would add, too, that while the invitation to make the presentation in Virginia is symbolic, I believe, of some of the attention that we're going to get, it's heartwarming just to see here in the North Country a convergence of both opinion and effort. It is a matter of public record, of course, that at times here in the North Country the environmental interest and the interest of the business community have clashed. And this appears to be, in every respect, a joint initiative greeted warmly by both sides of the political fence, so to speak. And it's off to a very, very good start. The decision by EPA to fund initially at the $70,000 level this particular study is very good. I'll be in Washington literally in a matter of days. We hope to get the folks who fund Park to match those funds even to the same extent. And we will be out marketing with the Eco-Industrial Park concept at our side literally in a matter of a month or so. So we're very excited.
Mm-hmm. I touched on before in terms of marketing on the base, though, this won't be an exclusive concept. There's some Canadian companies that may be targets out there to come down here to do packaging and distribution or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm. And
they're still coming here really for cost reasons or locational reasons, and their eyes glaze over, and they don't care about this concept up front. We aren't going to turn folks away that are good clients. So this isn't going to become kind of a closed door. You have to buy into this or you can't be on the base.
This is it's a voluntary concept, but I think too that regardless of who you are, what it is you produce, if someone like Bruce Stedman or Mark Berry went up to you and said, would you be interested in exploring ways with us to reduce the cost of your waste removal and waste recycling, to reduce the cost of your operation? I'm sure that any sensible businessman would say yes. And so whether it is a manufacturer of steel dump bodies that may wish to go to Mariah, or a cardboard corrugated operator that wants to operate at Rouse's Point, to the extent that they may have waste product, they're going to want to talk to us because the Eco-Industrial Park may very well represent an opportunity for them to reduce their operating costs, to increase their profits, and simultaneously contribute to the health and well-being of our environment and our economy.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a marvelous option. I think when presented that way, a business person would be hard-pressed to say no.
Mm-hmm. so if it comes for those companies, really an added value.
Absolutely.
They might have come here anyways, but this is something we can add to the pot.
The true beauty
It'll
of the
make it
concept.
even,
Mhm.
very good. There's a bond act before the voters this fall, and we understand that may have some implications for the future implementation of this concept. Could you touch on that?
Yes, and it's been just before we went on the air here, we received some poll results indicating that the North Country is not alone in its support of this project. The voters across the state very supportive of the Bond Act. We, of course, at Park, like the Chamber, view this as primarily mandate relief. These are things that have been mandated upon the community, and finally the state's going to step forward and provide some money for our hard-pressed communities to pay for the imposition of these mandates. But it has an impact on this eco-industrial park concept because it's quite possible that under a couple of sections of the Environmental Bond Act, once it passes, that additional funding would be available for us to literally grow our economy and protect our environment at the same time. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to our viewers that the park folks are going to be behind the Environmental Bond Act, and that we view this as working hand in hand with the eco-industrial park concept.
Mm-hmm. So what's the next step? We've got the facilities. We've got $70,000 to do a baseline study. Could you map out maybe kind of a timetable of how you may see this ideally kicking in the next few years? What steps may flow?
I'm going to need some help from Bruce on this,
Sure.
but I would anticipate that after this trip to Washington, we'll have a better idea of what funding, if any, we're going to receive from the federal folks. But assuming that that's in place, and I have reason to be optimistic, I would anticipate that work would immediately begin on the baseline study, which is literally an inventory of who's producing what kind of waste, and literally what are the missing links in the chain. So if you have someone over here producing X, is there somebody over here that makes Y that could use X to make Y, and then literally connecting up all the links to that chain. The marketing initiative, I would imagine, could begin well before the end of the year, but certainly in plenty of time for the spring of '97.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, our goal is to have a parallel path process here where we're doing the baseline study and preparing to market at the same time so that we don't miss any opportunities. It's not a linear path where we study for 8 months and then study another 6 months and then finally get to marketing in 2 years. It won't happen that way. In fact, the concept is already being marketed. So there are opportunities already being turned over and looked at even as we speak. So.
The federal portion of the funding would be used to develop the marketing plan, the strategic plan for marketing, and would bring us all the way to the point where we have literally a list of prospective companies that we would contact for a variety of reasons that would fit into this eco-industrial park concept. But the outlines of that study are already in place. In fact, that's part of our justification to the Office of Economic Adjustment, the folks who help communities with lost air bases, in requesting the $70,000. And so hopefully we'll have some good news for everyone when I return on Friday. And long before the snow comes, we'll be out there working.
Mm-hmm.
Just a couple of follow-up points. One, the study, as Mark said now, it's centered around this input and output analysis, looking at what people produce and what they need here in the region, again, from Montreal throughout the Champlain Valley. Now, once we have that list of inputs and outputs, our target market then is globally. We can look for in certain databases and find companies from all over the world that either use or provide those inputs and outputs, and that begins our target list. So we are starting locally and regionally, but expanding internationally to put this list together. The two key points of, and so to follow up on, again, your question and what Mark said, we're confident that we're going to get through the baseline study and into marketing very quickly. Now, what we need is to make the thing happen long term, the implementation phase, and that's where we're looking to the Bond Act. There's two key parts of the program in particular that we're looking to the Bond Act for. One is the establishment of a grant fund. This grant fund will be money set aside and administered by Park and used to give companies incentives to improve environmentally if they want to. That money can be used for training, it can be used to redesign their engineering process, it can be used to go out and find man-made materials instead of raw materials, natural resources, and those kinds of things to make environmental improvements for each company and give them incentives to do that. Another part of the Bond Act fund that we're looking at is to fund what we're calling as environmental enhancements, not only do we want to improve the companies that are out there on the base property, but we want to look at ways to improve the environment of the base property itself by using constructed wetlands or modifying existing wetlands out there in ways that will take nutrients out of the discharges before they hit Lake Champlain, to do some field demonstrations with solar energy or other renewable energy sources so that we can look for ways to make, again, an impact on these environmental resources that we have and also reduce the cost of the companies that are involved. So we feel that the Bond Act is critical for implementation.
Mm-hmm. In our last few minutes before we close, I know folks, since we have somebody here from Park, are always curious about what's happening out there, who's coming, who's looking to come here. Could you give folks a snapshot of kind of how things are cooking out there?
Well,
right
of
now?
course, we've had some good news recently. Builtwell Packaging, a company from Quebec, has located on the base and begun a packaging and fulfillment operation, which is expected to employ about 45 people long before the end of the calendar year. We will be making another announcement. I'll give Calvin's viewers a sneak preview here, probably before the end of the month, about an operator for our precision measuring and electronics laboratory, which ultimately we believe could lead to 9 or 10 professional level jobs, well-paying jobs, and we're very excited about that. At this time, Park is probably talking to, conservatively, 45 different companies, some from Canada, some from parts of the country south of the border, and we have reason to be very, very optimistic that a number of those companies are ultimately going to choose Plattsburgh as their place to expand. So I would say things are happening very nicely at Park. We have turned the corner on our finances. There was a bit of a state of disarray there a few months ago, but we've made some good progress there. Thanks in part to Senator Stafford, who funded us for some capital construction efforts. We've done some reorganization of the staff. I think the board, we have quite a few new members on the board. Everyone is becoming acclimated, and we certainly hit the ground running here in the fall season, which is our very important marketing season, particularly when you look up north of the border. So, in a word, it's going great. We're hoping for a lot more good news for our friends out there.
Looking at the base a year from now, confidently predict that people are going to see some more employers out there?
I'll go out on a limb and say that a year from now, it wouldn't surprise me if you had at least a half a dozen companies out there and several hundreds of jobs. We're particularly excited about two prospects, which are very big-name companies, and if one of those should step forward and sign on the dotted line, we hope by the spring of '97, I think that between that and the Eco-Industrial Park concept, Plattsburgh will be on the map again, and for some very good reasons.
Very good. Well, there you have it, an exciting new concept that will potentially help redevelop Plattsburgh Air Force Base, but really an exciting new concept for the whole North Country and all employers up here now and in the future. And as you've seen, really a very homegrown and home-promoted one, which is really particularly encouraging for all of us. And a concept that I can add the Plattsburgh North Country Chamber has embraced very enthusiastically and looks forward to working with Park and these folks on in the years ahead. Thank you for tuning in to North Country Commerce, and be sure and join us in future weeks.